Hello everyone and welcome to our first lecture for EDUC3000 Holistic Health. So hello to those of you that have not yet had the pleasure of my, lectures that are done rather fast. So these will be pre-recorded each week. You'll be able to watch them at your own leisure, and then we will continue our discussions in our tutorials on either Monday or Tuesday. So I'm taking the lectures and the tutorials, so it means there'll be complete transparency of information with everything that you need to do and so on. So let's start off with a welcome to country. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Whadjuk people, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. I respect their cultural beliefs and the spiritual relationship with their country and recognise that these are still important to the Whadjuk people today. So let's run through our course outcomes and expectations. So this is one of those courses that is essential before you go out on your childcare placement. So a lot of you will be going out in term 2 of this year, and I know others are out of sync, so you'll be going out at different times. And some of you, I'm assuming, have not already been. We shouldn't have had anyone that hasn't done this course that has been out on prac in childcare because it's a prerequisite. So we're looking at how we make sure that we look at the care routines for children from birth to 8 years old, and particularly focusing more in our early years centres, because that's where we have our different guidelines and different rules and regulations. We're going to look at this idea of an integrated approach to the health, hygiene, nutrition and safety issues. We're going to make sure that all of you can demonstrate a clear understanding of those principles of health and safety. That's part of our assessments with our quizzes. And we're going to build into it the idea of how we reflect on the implications of health and safety issues for us as educators in a school or a care setting. Because we do have lots of professional standards that we must meet and uphold regardless of which setting that we're working in. And even more so, I feel every year is more that is emerging that we must pay attention to as we get more knowledge about the world around us and so on. So when we're looking at our assessments for this course, we've got 3 different assessments, as normal for a lot of these courses. Your first assessment is a set of quizzes, and we'll be doing those quizzes starting in weeks 3 to week 8. So those quizzes will be online, and you'll get your marks back straight away from those because we'll be able to do the quizzes at the beginning of each tutorial. So you will have a certain amount of time to do them, and then you'll be able to get your marks straight back, and then we'll move on to the other elements of the tutorial. I'll have a discussion with you all about whether to do them mid-tutorial, beginning of tutorial, and so on. It depends, because we've got an afternoon tutorial on Monday, but we've got an early morning tutorial on Tuesday. So I want to make sure that everyone has an appropriate time for it. Our second assessment, which is due near the end of semester, is our website that you're going to build. And I know some of you are still scarred from building websites, but that's all right. We'll move on. So we will go through in great depth about what you need to put on that. And it's essentially explaining a number of sections to do with your care routines. So full details are listed in your course outline, and we'll go through it more starting with our first tutorial this week. And then we have an exam. We don't know the dates. We know that the exam is, I think it'll work out being week 10 of term. So you've got 9 weeks of our classes, then you'll have your exam week, then you'll have 2 weeks school holidays, including the Easter weekend, and then you'll head out on prac. So this whole course centers around health, and it's holistic health that we're looking at. So we're not looking at the idea of health being just a simplistic approach to it. So what I'd love you to do, possibly press pause, and I want you to think about what is the word health in its context for you. Do you think about it from a personal point of view? Do you think about it from a world point of view? Do you think about it from a mental health? I know at this point in time, we hear the buzzwords around health a lot. So take a minute or two, have a little think, and we'll bring some of those ideas back when we have our tutorial. We'll be thinking about what does health mean for each of us. So when we look at holistic health, we therefore need to take into account a little bit more than what we consider with straight health. So today we've got a much broader concept. We know that it is not just giving them good, nutritious food. We know that holistic health takes into account medical, physical, emotional, mental, all of those things become really important. So we used to consider it just from that point of view of, are they a healthy child? Meaning, do they have good breathing? Can they run? Can they coordinate their bodies? All those sorts of things. Whereas we know now that health has a much broader context and it's a much more nuanced approach to it from a lot of health professionals as well. So when we think about it from this other point of view, we need to expand that out and look at it from the point of view of, yes, definitely it's our physical health, but it's not just our physical health. It's looking at our social health, so relationships with other people. It's looking at our economic health, meaning that we know that people from very high rates of poverty have less chances than people who are from a more privileged environment. They tend to finish school earlier, they tend to move into lower paying jobs, so they perpetuate a poverty cycle. So we want to make sure that we're understanding the impacts of that. We know that health is to do with our emotional health and then our cultural health. We've seen the impact on our Indigenous people when their culture has been changed and altered, and our spiritual well-being as well. So the quality of a person's health is changing, and it's part of something that grows and evolves over time. Now, our health is really determined by, note that word, the dynamic interaction of genetics and environment. We often hear, and we'll go into this in more detail over the coming weeks, about this idea of nature versus nurture. One of the activities in our tutorial will explore this in a little bit more detail as well. So nature being what you're born with and nurture being how you grew up. So one being the genetics aspect of it and one being the environmental factors. And so what we're really going to look at is what is our impact as an educator. So making sure that we really emphasize this idea of preventative health. What are the choices that we make? And how can we encourage our very young people that we're working with to make those choices and engage in appropriate behaviours that really improve their life? And essentially, we're wanting to lessen any risks that we have. So what are some of the things that we know? So we know certain factors definitely influence children's health. One of them is hereditary or predisposition to certain health problems. So, for example, if you have a child in your class who has Down syndrome, there's certain things, they have some breathing conditions that they are more susceptible to. They've got definitely a whole lot of heart issues that they're more susceptible to. Certain things come with certain health problems. So if you have a child who has asthma in your room, you have to watch out for it. You have to have an asthma care plan and so on. You might have someone with Fragile X. They come with a whole lot of other things that we have. You might have someone with a disorder such as multiple sclerosis. You might have somebody with cerebral palsy. You might have somebody with various other things that they are born with, or they have a predisposition. So hereditary means they are born with it. Predisposition means something like asthma, where yes, they have it, but it means that other things will be heavily influenced by the fact they have asthma. So environmental factors that we know play a massive impact on health are things like a healthy diet, having access to fresh fruit and vegetables. It's stunning, the statistics about children, not so much in Australia, but particularly in places in the US, where they do not have good access to fruit and vegetables. I find that baffling in our world, where we can walk into Woolworths and Coles and there are fresh fruit and veggies just there. Whereas in a lot of supermarkets, they just don't have the demand for people to want fresh fruit and vegetables, so they don't sell them. That is terrifying for me. The idea of making sure that we help children participate in physical activity, this is something that as an early years educator you have to fight for, because what we know is that the playtime outside and movements are being eroded in favour of more, shall we say, other activities inside that involve reading or writing and things like that. So you have to make sure that you help them. Things that are about getting rest, having access to good medical care, making sure that there's no substance abuse happening in the home, that the medical care that they get is adequate for them, making sure that wherever possible we reduce stress for children, making sure they have safe and clean environments, and that they're part of families that are very stable, and making sure that they are safe in various homes. We're wanting to make sure that you can eliminate as many of those conditions and environmental factors that we turn them into positives for them. We want to make sure that we are aware of how those sorts of things, plus huge amounts of other things, really do affect children's health. So, how do we bring this idea of this concepts of health, safety, and nutrition? How do we know that they are interrelated? What is some of the research and data telling us? So, what we know is that each aspect of health, safety, and nutrition, each aspect is interrelated. So, we know that they provide building blocks, and therefore each makes a contribution to the development of the child and their child's ability to grow and thrive. Not just to grow, but to actually thrive. So, when we think about the term growth, it refers to the physical changes that a child goes through, the teeth that evolve naturally, that obviously they're growing taller, the gaining of weight in the right places at the right time, their vision, their hearing, all those sorts of things is part of their growth and development. So it involves that interaction of the genetic potential, so what they are born being able to do. So that gives you so many things. And then you've got the interplay with the environmental factors as well. So what does development mean? So it means development is the changes that occur through their physical, cognitive, social, emotional, motor, and language abilities. So development involves an interactive process of natural maturation. So basically the child is just going to continue to develop, and opportunities to experience and practice. So we've all heard of children who are deprived opportunities of learning language, and it literally fails to develop in their brains. So they are programmed to be able to create and communicate effectively, but if we don't give them those opportunities and allow them the potential to grow and develop, that's where we have problems. So each component is important, so they have to have growth, development, and wellness, but all three must be considered together, and every one of those influences the state and quality of the other things that you are working with. So let's have a think about safety. Now, as an early years educator, gosh, we have a lot of things that we have to consider, and safety is up there. So safety refers to our practices that reduce the risk of injury. It's not saying that we can always reduce it, but we need to think about what we're putting in place that reduce the risk of injury. So, big question, why do we need to be aware of it? So we need to think about everything that we're doing and all of the places that we are going and all of the equipment that we are using. And we always have to think, what could go wrong? And we avoid those things. We don't make everything at ground level, because then we also know that risky play is important. We know that needing to climb, to do weight-bearing activities, to be able to allow themselves to roll, to jump, to skip, to do all those things, to climb on the edge of something and then hold on tight and then lever themselves off. They're all part of that idea of understanding how their body works. So we need to have some limits and some rules, but we don't want to over limit things so that children are completely wetted up in cotton wool. That's not going to be useful for anyone. But we also have to be aware of how we can encourage spontaneity without discouraging those activities. So blending safety with making sure that you're allowing the children to explore in lots of different ways. That's a really hard balance for us as educators. So it's thinking about what can we do and how can we make it work with our everything that we are doing. Now, the next part that comes along is nutrition. So food is absolutely essential, but what we know is that not all food is equal. So yes, food provides nutrients, and we know that every child needs a range of nutrients because they need them to grow, they need them for their energy, they need to build up their immune systems, they need to repair their tissues, all those sorts of things. They need good nutrition. And we need a daily intake that is lots of different foods and that caters for them. We also know that little 2 and 3 year olds are very, very picky eaters. So it's making sure that you are helping them and providing them with as much as you can, and making sure that we're helping parents to understand what we're doing at school or what we're doing in the centre and how they can supplement some of that as well. We have to be very aware of how we talk about and use food. So food insecurity and unhealthy dietary practices, what we know is that it leads to malnutrition when they have unhealthy dietary practice, or obesity. Just because a child looks to be of an okay weight doesn't mean that they are healthy. It means that their diet is providing the essential nutrients for them, but it's potentially not providing all of the nutrients that they need. And so food insecurity, if a child has irregular meals, if they don't know if they're going to have dinner that night, they tend to gorge themselves at lunchtime or at breakfast, whenever they do have food. So it leads to unhealthy relationships with food. If you have a parent who is overly obsessive themselves about food and doesn't provide adequate food for their young child, I know I've had mothers who restrict calories in their toddlers because their toddlers are getting a bit of that really cute pudgy tummy that they get. And that's a really important part of their development, just like it is for about a 10 or 11 month old before they start walking. It's almost like they've got this excess pudge on them that then it gives them that excess, that huge amount of energy that they need once they start walking and moving. So we have to make sure we understand about food. We can't allow our own food issues to be fostered onto the children that are within our care. And we know that children's learning and behaviour are affected by their diet. So kids who do not have adequate nutrition, their brains are not firing so well. Kids who come to school hungry or don't have enough food at school and are constantly hungry, it impacts on their ability to learn. So what we know is that a child who is well fed is alert, they're attentive, they're able to do lots of physical things, and they have some really good learning experiences. A child who is not well nourished, they're probably going to be a bit quieter, a bit withdrawn. They might even be hyperactive because they're not receiving regular food, so their blood sugars are not being at a nice steady level throughout the day. They could be disruptive. They could be more prone to accidents and injuries because they're just not functioning the way that they need to. Their bodies are not coordinated the way that they need. So food is so important in a young child's development. We often underestimate it. Now, child's mental health. We know that adolescent and young adult mental health has been in the media for a huge amount. What we're seeing more is moving down into young children. So early childhood mental health, it's defined as their ability to experience, regulate and express emotions, to also be able to work with others, to form those good relationships and to be able to confidently explore their environment. So we know good mental health goes hand in hand with good social and emotional development. We have to understand how those things work together Children can feel good about themselves. They're more open to trying and learning new things. If they're very resistant and they're really nervous and really anxious, they're just not going to try a whole lot of things. Good mental health, it helps us to build some really good relationships with others and generally be able to enjoy life and handle those little ups and downs that you get instead of just melting down at everything that's going on or hiding in the corner. So healthy physical and mental development, it's really dependent on exposure to lots of different opportunities. So we're seeing the pandemic children. You will see them when you start to go on your childcare prac. You will see the kids who spent 18 months or more with just mum or mum and dad or mum, dad, and brother or sister and the dog. And they didn't have a lot of attachments beyond their immediate family. And some of those toddlers are really struggling. So some of them we've seen already that the attachment is different. So there's some research going on at the moment with a couple of different organisations really looking at the COVID children, not so much in WA, but certainly in Melbourne, where they had the much longer lockdowns, and in other places in the world where they're having the really, really long lockdowns and so on. So it definitely has created an impact on that idea of healthy social and emotional development. So why do we promote health, safety, nutrition? When is the ideal time? So what we know, whether we look at it through a positive or a negative lens, what we know is that all of the health, safety, nutritional, etc. needs of children, we can no longer assume that they're being met at home. We know there are more children in childcare. We know there are more working families. We know there are much greater issues in our society. So we're seeing them more in the world that we work in. So we occupy that ideal position as educators to observe their health, and we can help make referrals and assist families to understand what's happening in their little one that they have in their lives. If we can work with the families to look at early identification of any of our health impairments, then we can intervene. We can make sure that their growth and potential is enhanced in the best way possible. We can be that role model, and we can help children to see that there's better ways of doing things. So our role is really to make sure that we are identifying and communicating and educating ourselves and families as well. So where does health information come from? So it's available from a variety of sources. So think about things like daily observations and health checks. So looking at what's going on in a child's life every single day. You've got the health records that oftentimes you are able to access in a childcare centre. That's things like their current development progress. They've been to the community nurse and so on. You've got special health conditions or needs. You can talk to the children or their caregivers about daily habits and preferences, their eating, their sleeping. You can look at some screening tools that might be available. And you can definitely have a good conversation with families where possible. So lots of resources. We can start to think about how we can assess and monitor their health over a period of time. We can look at any developmental issues in whichever form that we are worried about. We can then work together to formulate some good intervention plans. We can work with the caregivers as well as potentially some service providers and look at some referrals for various things that need to be looked at in a greater form. And of course, we can help to evaluate a child's progress in some way, shape or form. So the information comes to us, but we're also the people who provide a lot of the information to the external sources in some form. So if we think quality early childhood programs, we need to make sure that they use a variety of techniques. Teacher observations are crucial, including daily health checks to monitor their health standards and identify potential health needs. And this is from your textbook. So what are daily health checks? I think this is one of the crucial things that as an early years educator, you get to see a child every single day. You get to see them Monday to Friday if they are in a school. If you're in a childcare centre, you might get to see them Monday to Friday as well. So it's where you can look at their general state of health. You can look at their appearance. So I know there are some children who would rock up to school and they were not in a fit state. They had rolled out of bed and then rolled into school, and you know that they had not been taken care of in the morning. You know that they had probably slept in their uniform for the night before and they were just turning up for school. I would have babies in childcare who would go home with a nappy in the evening that we had just popped on them, and they would arrive back the next day with that same nappy on them. So we knew that their nappy had not been changed in the 12 or so hours from pick up at childcare in the afternoon the day before to drop off at childcare the next morning. So be really aware of those daily health checks. Behaviour. When a child is moving between different parents due to custody and so on, you might see different behaviours. You might observe something and you're like, why is that going on now? And just doing those little observations and writing things down and talking with other people about it, and making sure if you're in a centre that has a number of staff that there are ways that these things are recorded. They're not just in your own head, but you're actually making sure that they're written and recorded somewhere. That's how we then can work with a family and potentially look at referrals or professional evaluations so that we can make sure we're providing the best care for our little people that we are working with. So if we have a think about it, this course is all focused on holistic health, which means it's more than just the basics of health being our medical care. So preventative healthcare, it's a new concept. It's more cost effective than fixing up something after it's already happened. If we can do those daily health checks, we can keep and monitor and have a look at a child constantly, we can intervene where necessary, it means that we're preventing longer term issues. If we can help parents or caregivers to understand how to provide good nutrition for their child, the importance of sleep. I know for young parents, I've spoken with some young parents and they had no idea that a child needs to sleep so much. They were thinking that their child, there was something wrong with them because they were sleeping so much. Their little 2-year-olds were sleeping, 14 hours a night. And they're like, but that's not good for them. It's like, no, that's what they need. That's when their brains grow. That's when their tissues repair. That's when all the new good stuff is happening. We need to understand the balance of nature and nurture and how each one impacts on the other. So having that core understanding that health is determined by, yes, your genetic makeup, but it's also influenced and determined by your environment. It's the balance of the two together. That our growth and development of children, it's influenced by health, safety, and nutrition. We provide the balance of those in a childcare setting. And most important, good mental health in early childhood lays the foundation for good mental health and well-being now and into the future. We know it does for all aspects of physical health as well, but it's being proven more and more that mental health development in early childhood really does influence how they tackle everything from later points on. So our final thought, this is beautiful. The body of a child will not grow if it is not fed. The mind will not flourish unless it is stimulated and guided. And of course, the spirit will suffer if it is not nurtured. So keep in mind, that is our role. We are the people who help a child to flourish and nurture. So I look forward to seeing you all at our tutorials on Monday or Tuesday. And if we can, I will talk about the textbook and all of our different things when we are there. All right, looking forward to seeing you all. Hopefully everybody has had a wonderful break, and I will see you in class.